Now to an escalating feud between US President Donald Trump and one of his own party's top foreign policy experts. After a very public falling out on Twitter, Republican Senator Bob Corker is now suggesting the president's policies could push the country towards war. Mr. Trump is hitting back at Corker, but as Joe Johns reports, he's also engaged in a battle on other fronts.
In a scathing critique, Senator Bob Corker telling the New York Times that President Trump's reckless threats could put the U.S. on the path to World War III. He concerns me. He would have to concern anyone who cares about our nation. Corker saying Mr. Trump is treating the presidency like a reality show, remarking, "I know for a fact that every single day at the White House is a situation of trying to contain him." Corker's blunt criticism coming after the president bashed him in a barrage of tweets Sunday morning, suggesting Corker begged him to endorse him for re-election. Corker flatly denying that account and calling the White House an adult daycare center.
Secretary Tillerson, Secretary Mattis, and Chief of Staff Kelly are those people that help separate our country from chaos.
This as the Trump administration effectively derails any potential deal with Democrats to protect dreamers, unveiling a long list of demands in exchange for a legislative solution. Among them, curbing funding for sanctuary cities, a crackdown on unaccompanied minors from Central America, and funding the border wall. Democratic leadership denouncing the White House proposal, saying the administration can't be serious about compromise or helping the dreamers if they begin with a list that is anathema to the dreamers. This proposal fails to represent any attempt at compromise. All this while Vice President Mike Pence is facing criticism for amplifying the president's feud with the NFL. The VP walking out of Sunday's Indianapolis Colts game after some players knelt during the national anthem. President Trump quickly taking credit, tweeting that he asked Pence to leave if any players knelt, a protest it seems the White House expected. The vice president traveled from Las Vegas, where he was paying tribute to the victims of the massacre, to Indianapolis for the game, and then back to Los Angeles. CNN estimates the travel cost to be around $250,000. Had Pence skipped the game, it would have been substantially lower.
Last time he's been to a Colts game was 3 years ago. So this looks like a PR stunt to me. He knew our team has had the most players protests. He knew that we were probably going to do it again. And so this is what systemic oppression looks like.
Well, Mr. Trump answered that criticism, tweeting that the trip by Vice President Pence was long planned. The Vice President is receiving great praise for leaving the game after the players showed such disrespect for country. Well, Joe Johns joins us now from the White House. And Joe, as you mentioned in your report, that figure of that flight, the cost jaw-dropping, $250,000. The question is, was this all a publicity stunt?
There are some indications that it was a publicity stunt simply because the president tweeted that he did ask the vice president to go to the game and to leave, in fact, in the event that the players knelt. So seems pretty clear that there was some element, if you will, of putting on a public relations show. The president and a number of people here are aware that this appears to be a political issue that plays well for the president. So he's tried over the days the controversy has raged to essentially make the best of it, and apparently did so over the weekend, Lynda.
And Joe, looking at this feud between Senator Bob Corker and the US president, there must be many Republicans wondering why Donald Trump would do this to someone he needs to push through tax reform.
And that's a good question. There's a pre-existing relationship between the president and Senator Bob Corker. They played golf together. He's been described as one of the senators who's talked to the president more than most. So interesting that we would have this very public back and forth between these two men. The tipping point, if you will, seems to have been when Bob Corker announced that he would not run for re-election. There's a dispute over whether the president encouraged him to run for re-election or whether the president told him he wouldn't endorse him. Nonetheless, it's clear, as you said, Bob Corker is still very important to the president, even though he's leaving Capitol Hill in more than a year. He's still very important to things like the decertification of the Iran deal, and certainly to tax cuts, because the president can only lose a handful of votes on that signature issue in order to push it through the Senate, Lynda.
And Joe, when Senator Corker tweeted that essentially that Donald Trump needs to be babysat, a lot of Democrats are retweeting that tweet. How unusual is that to see?
Well, that's true. Certainly a lot of Democrats are retweeting that tweet because it's quite clear that whenever the Republican Party gets into a public disagreement, Democrats see that as inuring to the advantage of the people who oppose Mr. Trump. No real surprise there. But what is interesting is that repeatedly on some of the most controversial issues, the challenge has been for Republicans to agree. And in many cases, even as we saw on the repeated tries on repealing and replacing Obamacare, it's been difficult for the Republicans to get on the same page.
All right, Joe Johns, always good to have you with us live from Washington. Thank you very much.
You bet.